Grief in childhood is real and widespread in Canada. Each year, more than 203,000 Canadian children under 18 will lose someone in their extended family. And nearly 1 in 14 will experience the death of a parent or sibling by age 18. Such loss is one of the most stressful experiences a child can face, affecting emotions, behaviors, and lifelong well-being. But young grief is often hidden. Children may not know how to express their feelings, and their sadness can manifest in changes in mood, trouble at school, or even acting out. And unrecognized and unsupported children's grief increases the risk for depression, anxiety, and struggles later in life. Welcome to Beyond the Surface. Today we're talking about such an important topic, and I have the privilege of welcoming back Dr. Dadria Lewis. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
It's great to have you, and I'm excited to talk about a difficult but such an important topic. And before we dive in this important topic, we're going to be watching a story of someone who's experienced it. Let's watch it together.
I'm really concerned about my son. Ever since we lost his older brother, he's been struggling. I knew it would be difficult for all of us. But I didn't know it would be like this. I've been getting calls from his school more often now. They say he's being rather aggressive with the other kids, disrespectful to the teachers. I've tried talking to him about it. But then he turns his aggression on me. He says he doesn't need my help. He can take care of himself. And I know in many ways he is capable. But he's not a man yet. He still needs help. I heard him say once that he's all alone. How can he think that? I'm right here. His family is right here. How can he feel so alone? How do we help him?
Welcome back. So Dr. Lewis, you just watched someone who's describing the grief of a child. So we have this family everybody's experiencing grief. But it seems that the child's grief is not so much paid attention to. Does that happen often?
Yes, it can happen because, especially when the adults are wrapped up in their own grief, and sometimes what I would call it is the hidden mourners. Children are the hidden mourners many times because the stigma, if you want to call it a stigma related to it, or a myth rather, that's related to grief, is that the child doesn't understand the depth of the grief, or they don't feel the loss as deeply as adults do. So sometimes we're not paying attention to what is going on with the child. And additionally, we may be struggling, the adults may be struggling with managing their own grief, and they don't know how to manage their own grief and manage the grief of a child at the same time.
That's really challenging. And as we saw, like many kids go through grief because they lose someone in their lifetime, at least someone, right?
And grief is not only for loss of someone, it could be loss of something. So it could be the loss of where you're moving, so loss of a home, where you've moved from one place to the next. You don't even have to move countries. It just could be moved from one place to the next, moving from one school to another school. It could be the loss of something very important to the child, maybe the loss of a pet. So it could be loss in many of its forms, not only by death.
And we usually think of grief and death, right?
Right.
But grief is the experience of a loss.
Right. It's the experience of a loss, and that psychological, cognitive, affective response to that loss.
Really interesting because that opens our perspective on the topic
Of grief, yes.
Yeah. And how do I know what are the signs of a child grieving?
Well, it's different depending on the age because children develop different cognitive levels at different ages. So how they understand it might be a little bit different. Not that they don't experience it, but how they understand it might be different. So someone who's like 0 to 2, they may not understand that the body has died, the breathing has stopped. They may not understand all that, but they understand that this person is not in their life anymore. So they miss the presence, and what you could see is like irritability, crying, difficulty soothing the child. They may not be eating or sleeping as they should, some withdrawal. Sometimes you may find aggression, separation anxiety. So they cling more to the caregivers that are around them. So maybe in this scenario here, this child losing a sibling may now be worried about losing their parents as well. So now they're clinging to the parents, worried about even grandparents or aunts and uncles, friends. They begin to worry about losing this person as well.
And that makes sense because if they haven't lost anybody up until this point, they are shocked with the reality that you can lose people.
You can lose people.
And that could be transferred to other people in your life, right?
Right,
That's
right.
interesting.
And then, like for preschool, they may not understand. They may start wondering if they did something. Did I cough and cause the person to get sick? So let's say someone had cancer or some other autoimmune disease or something, and they die from an illness or they pass away from an illness. They wonder, did I cough and cause the person to be ill, or did something I do? Did I not wash my hands? Especially coming out of COVID times, and that awareness comes around how we could spread germs. So that
Absolutely.
2 to 6, right? That 2 to 6, where they're thinking about. They're very egocentric, so a lot of the things that are happening around the world, it's from their perspective. I am the cause of, or so what we could see some anxiety, some more of that separation anxiety as well, temper tantrums, aggression, regression to bedwetting, thumb sucking, or developmental milestones that they have already reached. They may regress in those things. So we're not seeing the typical sadness and crying sometimes that you may see in adults, but you're seeing them express in ways that they can, that something is wrong, my world is not right, I miss something, someone, there is a loss that I'm experiencing, and it comes out in these ways. As I mentioned maybe in a prior thing when we were talking about children, is that sometimes they don't have the words.
The lack of vocabulary is a problem there sometimes.
To express it. When we look at someone who's 6 to 11, when they start understanding that permanence and that they're not necessarily the cause of it, what you may see is disrupted sleep, not being able to concentrate at school, so affecting their learning. Sometimes there are some intense reactions, worrying about the survivors. And then when you get to like 12 and older, they may start suppressing their feelings depending. Is my caregiver, my aunt, or whoever is left there, are they comfortable talking about these things? And they pick up on it. And if you're not comfortable talking about these things, then they keep it inside. And then they're not able to talk about it. They're not able to grieve.
They're learning the unwritten rules of their environment, right?
Right.
So it's kind of on the adults to start conversations and make the space for those conversations to happen.
Right. So I say we are the moderating factors. The caregivers are the moderating factors. They are the ones who need to be paying attention to provide the space for the children. So they are that protective domain that we're responsive to the distress, helping them to emotionally regulate, creating that stable home environment. I had a friend whose child lost a grandparent, and they had the funeral on one day, and the other day there was a birthday party for a friend. She brought the child to the birthday party because we want to create some level of normalcy and stability in that situation. So yes, they might be pausing for grief and mourning, but you still want to create that that stability
That is
for the
so
child.
interesting. You don't keep the child from going to a birthday party
No.
because a grandparent died.
No, so then the next day was a birthday party. They carried the so the child gets to understand. Okay, life continues. There is stability. Life has not upended so badly that we don't know what's happening. Because children need predictability. They need stability. They need to feel that they're safe. And some of that creating that normalcy helps them to feel that way. Where there also that reciprocity, where we have those conversations that you're talking about, where we need to have that open, engaged conversation. It has to be age appropriate, right?
That makes sense, yeah.
Right. So maybe like a 3 to 5 year old, 3 to 6 year old, you may talk about what happened to, because they're going to ask you what happened when they died, where are they going, why did they put them in the box. They ask these questions, and many times adults don't know themselves the answer for themselves, so it's hard to answer these questions. So if you're in a grief or a loss situation, you need to start answering those questions for yourselves so that you're able to answer the questions when the children ask.
Wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah, and if you don't know the answer, you can say, let me think about this and I'll give you an answer later. Because sometimes it hits you like that and you're like, your brain freezes.
Kids have that power
Right.
to ask those kinds of questions sometimes.
Right. So you could say, and then you have to come back. So they know that they can trust your
gotta
word.
keep your promise.
Yes, you have
that's
to come back and answer those questions. I had the same friend whose child, he was about 3 years old. I don't know, this child's such a deep thinker. He wanted to know where the grandparent had gone. And because...
A 3-year-old, wow.
A 3. And the parent, who is a Christian, explained about death and the resurrection, when Christ will come and they'll be resurrected to heaven. And then he's like, God is taking too long to come. I'm ready to see my grandparents, so they will have these, things, and they'll say the things that maybe we're thinking, and they'll have the bravery to say out loud, And the question that he asked was, because we use euphemisms, we say they're gone to sleep, they're passed away. So he had heard the idea of they're gone to sleep, and he said, Mom, no, they're dead. They're not sleeping because they're not going to wake up. So we need to be, especially in that age, you're very concrete, 3 to 6, 7, 8, they're very concrete thinkers. So we have, so we don't use euphemisms that, or metaphors that adults can understand or older teens could understand. Use concrete words. Their eyes, they're stopped breathing, the heart isn't working, their mind has stopped, and they are no longer alive. So use words that describe what is happening to the body, to the person, because they have these questions that they ask. They want to know, older teens might want to know, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here on earth? So it might have them asking these questions. The 6, 7-year-old may want to know what happens after death? What happens when they put them in the box? Can they still breathe? There's so many questions. So it's good for us to be clear for ourselves, our own beliefs about death, so that we can have the conversations with the children.
And I think sometimes we wait till things happen to be ready. And I think it's important for us to take this moment to reflect, right? What are our own biases, our own beliefs, right? Because death happens in uncertain times. And I think having these conversations is a good way to prepare for potential future conversations we might have, right?
Right.
I really appreciate this conversation. We just need to go for a quick break, but we'll be right back. Okay. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back after the break.
In a Canada facing uncertainty,
we believe there's more to life.
From mental health to faith journeys.
From finding purpose to discovering love's perspective.
Hope Channel Canada brings light to life's deepest questions.
Because there's more to your story.
Hope Channel Canada, there's more to life.
Visit hopetv.ca.
Welcome back to Beyond the Surface. We're so glad you joined us today, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories, your feedback, maybe suggestions for future episodes, a topic that you would like us to cover. So you can write us at info@tv.ca. We really want to hear from you. And I want to pause a little bit just to take this moment to thank Hope Channel Canada and especially thank our agents of hope. This show would not be possible without our agents of hope. They support programs like this, and you can become one agent of hope too if you're not one yet. You just need to look at the information on the screen and join us, and you can support shows like Beyond the Surface or even future episodes of this show. So feel free to join as an agent of hope. And I'm here back with Dr. Lewis, and we're talking about this such an important topic. So what are the things that might impact grief in a child?
So some of the things that might impact how a child experiences grief or the intensity of the grief is the circumstance of the death. Was it unexpected? Was it prolonged? Was it a prolonged illness? Was it violent or sudden? And were they present? Especially if it's a violent death, that kind of, were they present at this when it took place? So some of those things can impact how intense a child experiences the grief reactions. The thing too is that though sometimes you may not see any reactions right away. So it may show up a few months later. So be on the lookout. And many times you're like, oh, they're playing or they're laughing, they're fine. And we don't check in, we don't have the conversations. And then we start seeing acting out behavior later or withdraw behavior later, or they start asking the questions later. So we need to pay attention. It may not show up right away.
You might experience a short relief thinking everything's fine. And then if you don't make the connect the dots, you might think the acting out or the symptoms are not even related. To the grief itself.
Right.
That is so interesting.
Right.
And it sounds to me that if it's very traumatic, it might have more lasting effects.
Right. Yes.
But at the same time, you mentioned before, it depends on how the child also gives meaning to that, right?
Right.
Because what you consider traumatic may not be what the child considers
traumatic, and what you may think is normal, the child may consider it as traumatic. So the meaning that they give as well. Their relationship to the deceased also impacts that. If the closer they are to the person who they lose or the thing that they lose, the pet that they may lose, then the greater the grief response that we are generally expecting. So the emotional closeness can impact whether or not we have more intense grief reactions or even maladaptive grief reactions.
So if the closer you are or the closer your connection to the person, the harder it might be. Right. You said something about maladaptive. So I'm wondering, because grief seems to be something normal.
Yes.
Grief seems to be part of life.
Yes.
We all lose someone.
Right.
When do I know it became more complex than that, or maybe when I need to look for help? So what are the signs I need to be looking at?
So what we're looking for is when the sadness, when the missing the person, when there's difficulty in life, it starts impacting life, living.
Oh, I see.
So it's impacting school, it's impacting their relationships with their friends, it's impacting their relationships with family members, it's impacting just how they view the world. Some may say they want to be with the person who has died. And what they're missing is that connection, and there may be intense feeling of loneliness. There may be like a lot of anger or bitterness. So sometimes even when you look at the spiritual piece of it, if they are spiritual or religious, they may be angry at God. So you may have that piece that you may need to walk through.
Why God would allow that to happen.
Right. And they may be angry. They may be even angry at the person who passed away. Why did you leave? You've left me here. And now I have to walk this life without you. So we have our disbelief. Maybe they can't believe. So if we're having these prolonged things that are now impacting living, So this disbelief, this loneliness, wanting maybe to be with the person who has died, difficulty engaging or reintegrating with their friends, with the family, then this is when we're like, we need additional support for this. Because as you mentioned, grief is normal and grief takes time. It could take years, for someone to walk through the grief process.
Yeah.
The thing is it impacting living?
That makes sense, because and it's like saying it's normal doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
No.
But sometimes it's going to hurt beyond what you can function, right?
Right.
Beyond what we can cope with.
Right.
Beyond our resources, maybe.
Right. So as I was saying, it's normal, and you may feel those waves. It comes in waves. So there'll be a time when the child may be sad or expressing these things, and then there are times they're fine, playing, all that. That's normal grief. So it comes in waves. It's not always there, and they have questions, they have feelings, but it's not always there. When we have it there and start impacting functioning, as you said, then this is where we're like, this is what we need help with. It's diagnosed as prolonged grief disorder.
Oh, I see.
So when we have maladaptive grief, and they have 3 of the symptoms that I mentioned before, like feeling as though they want to be with the person who died, disbelief about the death, avoidance of anything having to do with the person who died, or having issues connecting emotionally, or the emotional pain is too much. There's numbness, or there might be emotional numbness. They're not feeling connecting. You're not seeing emotions coming. They're not emoting as they used to before, or life is now meaningless. If we see any of these 3, then we're looking at maladaptive grief, and it's could be diagnosed as prolonged grief disorder.
And then a child with this diagnosis might receive special treatment for that.
Right. And it would be diagnosed by a professional. But what we're looking for as parents, teachers, is it impacting functioning? Then we need to take them to seek professional help.
That's really helpful, Dr. Lewis. We're just going to take a moment to hear from Mike and Pam. I want to invite you, please, Pam and Mike, to share your insights into children who are going through grief.
People say children are resilient. They'll bounce back. And the truth is they are resilient, but they also have some limitations. They don't have the experience with grief that older people have. They don't have the coping skills. They don't have the resources that we have as adults. So that means that children are very much at risk.
I wasn't in my mid-30s before I had a significant loss of my grandfather. And I still felt like a child because, you have that relationship with them and you're always the little one. My father passed away when I was in my mid-50s. And the minute I stopped being daddy's little girl, I had difficulty transitioning to some of the things that I needed to do in order to be able to grieve in a healthy way.
Children, of course, go through that process even more slowly than we do. They don't have the resources. So as adults, we need to pay particular attention to them when they've had a loss. That means that they need to feel safe. They need to feel like they are supported and nurtured, like their future is not in doubt, that there's a plan, and that they're secure. They also need to know that it's okay to express their emotions, to think, to talk, to cry, to play it out, those kinds of things. And as adults, we need to be able to take the time to listen to them and to help them with that process. When a child sees mommy or daddy crying in a healthy way, that tells the child that it's safe for them to cry. When they hear mommy and daddy talking about the stories, or see grandparents talking about these stories and telling them and crying at times, again, they see what healthy grief looks like, and they're able to begin to process it as well. So that kind of support is going to be critical for children who have had a loss and need to grow through that loss and feel safe.
Above all else, we want our children to know that they're loved, even as they themselves experience this loss of someone that they loved. We want them to know that they are loved.
Thank you so much, Mike and Pam. And I really want to thank you, Dr. Lewis, for being with us today. Your insights, your help at this topic is so invaluable. Any final thoughts as we wrap up our show today?
So, something I want us to think about is what we're trying to promote is adaptive grief reactions, because as we mentioned, grief is normal, and we grieve and we miss the person or whatever the loss is. So what we want is to find comfort in connection with the deceased, maybe honoring the person's memory. So as a family, as a caregiver, how could we honor the memory? How can we connect them or find meaning that comes from this particular loss, and help the children to figure that out, even to maybe do like engage in pro-social activities. If there was a death because of a drunk driver, maybe they want to connect with Mothers Against Drunk Driving or something like that, or create their own
ritual or
right.
their own way of grieving, right?
Way of grieving for that person.
And it has to be meaningful to their experience,
right?
Yeah.
Meaningful to their experiences. We could use creative outlets, music, bibliotherapy, puppets, acting things out. You're going to see this in the child's play, especially if they're younger. And don't get uncomfortable. They may start burying all the toys and all of that. I remember when my son was like 2.5, there was a death, and to make sense of it, he buried his teddy bear. They were under the thing. They put them in boxes because he was making sense of it. So you'll see it coming out in their play, and that's them processing it, and that's fine. It's fine. That's them adapting to the grief process. We could, if you need, you're seeking therapy or professional help, there's play therapy. So there, I know in the Ontario area, there are more play therapists, and I know there are play therapists in other provinces as well that use play as a modality for the healing process.
Amazing.
So, and there are educational resources. There's kidsgrief.ca, the Child and Youth Grief Network. There is Children and Youth Grief Network Canada. So there are different websites also that as parents maybe you're struggling, you're trying to figure out how to answer these questions, that you could go online to seek support. I know the friend I keep telling you about, that mom, she went online, like, what should I say? What are some conversations that I should have? What's age appropriate for this child? So you could go and educate yourself as well about how to have these conversations with your child and what you should be looking for. And it's wonderful when home and school can work together. I volunteered somewhere, and there was a girl who had a friend that died, and she was always talking about it in class, and it was disturbing the class. So we processed that through play modalities, and just allowing her to talk about it. A space where she could just talk about it, and after a while, we connected with the parents, so they know you need to have these conversations, so it's not happening in places where it may disturb the other kids and cause challenges in other areas.
Great examples of supports, great examples of how kids can process their grief. You wrapped us up in a wonderful way. Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. And thank you for watching Beyond the Surface. I'll see you in a future episode.